Alright, so I have got all my, it's night so I can't really show you this stuff outdoors, but I got all my sensors. um, in the last video I showed that I got all the sensors working and attached to the proto board in the Raspberry Pi. In this video I'll talk about the next steps. So I actually took the Raspberry Pi and all the sensors out to the aquaponics system, and I poked a hole in the raft for the pH sensor, and so it's submerged in that water all the time. I've got a temperature sensor in the deep water culture bed, and in the main aquarium, and also in just hanging out in the air underneath the table to get an ambient air temperature reading. I've got the range finder system pointed from, I've got it at the moment, it's just taped to the underside of the table with duct tape pointed straight down at the fish tank, and it's recording those values. I was getting a little bit of weird responses from that. Every once in a while I would get back something about 12 centimeters less than other times, and I think what was happening was it was like getting a bounce back from some surface on the top edge of the tank. Rather, it might have been close enough that there's some kind of angle bounce back that was getting through, and it wasn't the water. I'll investigate ways to fix that later, but for now I'm just filtering outliers in the recording, and then I take like 10 samples, and anything that's significantly different from the average gets thrown out, and then I do a new average and pass that in. And that seems to be working. It's hovering between 30 and 34 centimeters based on, or depending on when the flood drain bed is full or empty. Seems like about a 4 centimeter swing, 3 or 4 centimeter swing. I'll have more data for that analysis later, but just eyeballing it, that's what it seems like, which seems reasonable. I need to actually add a couple jugs of water to the system tomorrow morning before I head out of town, because it's a little low. There's a slow evaporation rate in the system. The water's just going to disappear over time, so that's just something I have to deal with. But yeah, so that sensor's working. The pH sensor is wired and it's working. And so anyway, then I finished my web service. Using Swagger, we can play around with all of these services. So if I fetch the list of aquaponics systems stored, there's only one, and it's a Hobbyist. And you know what? Let's go to. There's another step. I've got. Well, no, let's not do that. Anyway, so right. So this is running on my local system. If we fetch the containers, we've got the aquarium tied to system ID 1. We've got the flood drain bed tied to system 1, and we've got the deep water culture bed tied to this system. The type value there is a enum. I kind of want to make that just a string, but for now it's an integer. And then of course sensors, if we fetch the list of sensors that I've got hooked up, we've got it's in that container on that system. This is the aquarium temperature sensor, is sensor ID 1, and it reports units in degrees Fahrenheit. And then the next sensor is the temperature sensor in the deep water culture bed, and that's sensor ID number 2. And then it took me a while. I had some bugs in my code, and this one, if you'll notice, container ID 0. This is a sensor that doesn't have a container, and it took me a while to get that working. It took a few tries, and then ultimately the results of that is that that ID was number 5. And then the next one is the pH in the deep water culture bed, and that's ID 6. And then we've got finally the aquarium depth sensor type range finder or whatever in ID 7, and its units are inches. So, and that's actually not true. I'm currently restoring it in centimeters, so that's a lie. But data is data. I can use a process to clean that up later. I'm not worried about it. As long as it's being recorded for now, it's fine. And finally, we've got sensor data, and that's the big guy. And most of these are uninteresting. You can create one simply. You can edit one, delete one, or fetch a single entry by its ID. I was playing with expanding the URL to include some of the other parameters like sensor ID or system ID or whatever, and that works fine. But for right now, what I'm using as kind of the interesting fetch is a list of sensor data with the newest first, I guess. So right now we see 3 temperature readings that happened 6:21. This is UTC 6:21:16, and it's 11:21. So this was just moments ago. And ambient air temperature is 59 degrees, and the water temperature in the aquarium is 72.6, and the water temperature in the deep water bed is 72.8. It seems that the deep water bed gets a couple degrees warmer during the day. That's probably because it's in a dark colored tub, and it's fully exposed to the sunlight, whereas the aquarium is not, as well as the top surface of that deep water bed is covered in a layer of insulating styrofoam. So it probably loses its temperature very slightly slower than does the aquarium. But anyway, so that's working fine. Now, let's see. So behind that, 30 seconds prior to that, we got a pH reading of 7.868, and I haven't recalibrated this since hooking it up to the Raspberry Pi, but it seems pretty close to what I was expecting. A little under 8 is about right, I think. I'll verify with the API tester and recalibrate when I get back from Kansas City. And then finally, the final sensor, we've got sensor ID 7 is the rangefinder, and it tells us that we've got 31.5 centimeters from the sensor surface to the surface of the water. And as I said, that fluctuates between like 31 and 34, or something like that, depending on the current state of the flood drain system. But anyway, so I have instrumentation now. This data is not rendered in a way that's particularly useful. If I want to just check out what the temperatures are, this is useful, I guess. If I want to make sure that there's more than a couple inches of water, then this is I can. It's kind of useful. And if I want to know right now what the pH is, I can get a pretty decent value estimate from that. But I want to do a lot of other things with this data, but that'll have to happen later. I've run out of time. I expect I'll add a page to this that'll just have some human-friendly output, like with a current values or most recent values, plus a chart that shows like a historical, like the last few hours or maybe the last couple days, with all of the sensors displayed in a reasonable layout of a couple like plot lines basically, so it'll just kind of show what the trend is and whatnot. That could be pretty interesting information. And then I need to set up some triggers to notice bad outliers and to do something about it. Like if there's just a couple readings out of a set of 10 that are weird, it's okay to just throw those away. But if it's consistently weird, then I need to know about that. So I need to set up something to send some emails or send some text messages to alert me that there's an issue before I get time to create the phone app. But anyway, this is all very promising. I wasn't positive I could get it done before my flight tomorrow morning, but I did with a few hours to spare. So I'm pretty pumped. It's fun. This is the fun stuff for me, is learning a lot about things and playing around with technology at the same time as building some hobbyist project. That's like, bee's knees. That's the best possible stuff for me. I love that, especially when there's some hardware components and soldering things and figuring out how sensors work and getting the applied stuff to work. It's all great. This is good stuff. So I've got a simple Python script gathering data. Every 30 seconds it grabs a set of data and spits it out. It takes a few seconds to fetch some of these, and they do it it's linear. So like it'll do temperature 1, then temperature 2, then temperature 3, then a distance measure, and then a pH measure, like in that order. And once it's finished, it doesn't wait to upload an individual value. It uploads each one as it gets it, but it doesn't do them all in one block. But anyway, after the pH reading is measured, then we sleep for 30. Then the Python script sleeps for 30 seconds. So what turns out is I get a little faster than 1 minute per data set cycle, which is pretty good. I think it won't overwhelm my database, I don't think. Though I suppose I should check and make sure I know where that database is stored. I think it's in drive E, which is my big drive, but if not, then it might fill up, and that could be catastrophic. So I need to figure out where that file is, but I'll do that next. Anyway, I'm pleased with how things are going, so next update will probably be something about plants or fish or something next week. So I won't really have a ton of time to work on this between now and then. But after that, then I'll start building some website goodies and phone app. So those things will actually be useful for me. And then who knows? Sky's the limit, I guess. That's it for now. See you soon.